Everybody has heard about the famous Library of Alexandria and the tragedy that sent humanity back 1000 years. But what if I told you that the burning of the Library of Alexandria was actually not that big of a deal? Let me explain. Sure, I'm not denying the fact that the library was an amazing research center that gathered talented scholars all around the Western world and was responsible for the advancement of science, philosophy, and maths. What I'm saying is, the fact that the library was destroyed at some point in the past doesn't mean that all the knowledge in it was lost, nor was it the sole reason humanity might have suffered some delays. The Great Library of Alexandria in Alexandria, Egypt, was one of the largest and most significant libraries in the ancient world. It was part of a larger research institution called the Mouseion, and it had the purpose of storing the most amount of information it could about the known world. The library quickly acquired many papyrus scrolls, owing largely to the Ptolemaic kings' aggressive and well-funded policies for procuring texts, so he could attract the top philosophers and writers at the time to the great and newly founded city of Alexandria. It is unknown precisely how many such scrolls were housed at any given time, but estimates range from 40,000 to 500,000 at its height. With this, the city named after Alexander the Great came to be regarded as the capital of knowledge and learning, but unfortunately, all great things come to an end. Since its founding in around 300 BC and for almost 200 years afterwards, the success and fame of the library only grew further, with discoveries such as the circumference of the Earth, the rules of geometry, and the screw-shaped water pump that is still in use today. But to understand how this pioneer establishment started to fall into disuse, we gotta understand how it worked first. For example, the books stored all over the enclosure were divided into many subjects like law, comedy, history, medicine, mathematics, and natural science, but one of the more peculiar categories was a category called From the Ships. Whenever a ship arrived at the harbor in Alexandria, government officials would go aboard, searching for books and bring them into the library for inspection. These books were either returned immediately or get confiscated and replaced with a copy made by the library scribes, if deemed necessary. Legend says that some of the copies were so well made that the owners wouldn't even realize they were being handed a copy instead of the original. But this becomes progressively harder to do when there are no scholars to do maintenance of the books. You see, during the reign of Ptolemy VIII, in the second half of the 1st century BC, growing social unrest and other major political and economic problems led the emperor to devote much less attention to the library than his predecessors. Even the head of the library resigned from its position to show his discontent, but was quickly replaced by none other than a palace guard, which had no experience at all for such an important position in the city, but at least he was guaranteed to support the king in political decisions, so you can start to understand the absolute chaos and corruption that was happening at the time. Unfortunately, the same political and economic change was happening in the whole city, and the population wasn't having it. The city underwent a slow decline during the later years of the Roman Empire, with the population going from roughly 600,000 to less than 100,000 people, and the same must have happened at the library. The gradual decline of staff, crucial for the maintenance and care of the building itself, and the papyrus scrolls in it, was a clear recipe for disaster. The thing about ancient libraries is that merely existing wasn't enough to preserve their contents. Papyrus was a relatively fragile material, and unless it was well maintained in a dry and dark place, it would slowly start to fall apart with regular handling and would need to be recopied periodically before the writings on it became unreadable. One of the things that made the Library of Alexandria so special wasn't that it served as a big warehouse of books. It was the social commitment to studying the scribes, maintaining them, and produce new copies to guarantee that no information would get lost. Without such commitment, the books would disintegrate even without a fire. This mess of political unrest and population decline gave start to a gradual decline over the course of several centuries, with other libraries and cities starting to build up their own research centers and attracting scholars which would otherwise go to Alexandria. One of these libraries, which later became known as its biggest rival, had the name of Library of Pergamum, and can be argued to be another reason why I made this statement at the beginning of this video. The Library of Pergamum, located in modern-day Turkey, was founded in the 3rd century BC with the purpose of competing with Alexandria for cultural superiority. In other words, it came to try and dethrone the almighty Alexandria, but this was actually good news for society in general. Pergamum wasn't as big. It is said that it housed approximately 200,000 volumes of books, but it had two things Alexandria didn't have. Pergamum had one of the first architectural methods of book preservation, and it used parchment, a different material used for writing. By leaving an empty space of about 50 centimeters between the outer walls and the shelves, it allowed for air circulation and guaranteed that the air inside the building wouldn't become overly humid in the warm climate of Turkey. As the Great Library of Alexandria had the monopoly of papyrus to use in their books, its price rose to insane levels, and its extraction became unsustainable, seeing that they started running out of local supply for papyrus, reaching local extinction of the material. So Pergamum had to find another way around this demand in the market. They started using an ancient technique used for thousands of years, which consisted in drying and hardening animal skin, which with further treatment proved to be a good replacement for papyrus. This material was known as parchment. Parchment reduced the Roman Empire's dependency on Egyptian papyrus and allowed for the increased dissemination of knowledge throughout Europe and Asia. Now let's debunk the myth. Was Julius Caesar actually responsible for the destruction of the greatest library of its time? Short answer, no. Long answer, the library wasn't burned all in one go. The library was burned at least 3 times. First, on accident when Caesar, surrounded by Egyptian forces, was forced to set fire to his own ships to prevent any advance of the enemy, and consequently, the fire spread and damaged some of the storehouses near it, which included part of the library. But the library wasn't totally destroyed. It's recorded that Emperor Claudius funded an extension during his reign, so the library was still in operation 100 years after Caesar. But during this time, the library started to diminish in importance. Rome was the center of the empire. Scholars and historians flocked to the Eternal City to make a name for themselves. Then, in the 3rd century AD, the empire hit a rough patch, where lots of internal fighting and rebellion led Emperor Aurelian and his troops to destroy part of the city, which happened to include the library. This was followed a couple decades later by a siege by Diocletian, which did even more damage to the city and would have destroyed anything of the library left from the last round of fighting. To top it up, there were reports that a Muslim ruler in the 1600s ordered its destruction, stating, "If the books are in agreement with the Quran, we have no need for them, and if these are opposed to the Quran, destroy them." So the library wasn't destroyed in one go, but by the number of attacks it suffered, it's pretty clear that by the second half of the millennium, it was long gone. Seeing that there were plenty of other libraries scattered across the Roman Empire by the end of the 2nd century AD, it is argued that the fire in Alexandria did not destroy any irreplaceable scrolls, because some people suggest that on the later centuries that the library was still in use, it did not contain any important book that hadn't been copied or sent elsewhere. Instead, the majority of the scrolls could have been merely receipts of purchases of lands and cattle throughout the city, or any other information that was pretty much useless nowadays. This argument can be supported by the simple fact that we don't actually know the ultimate fate of the otherwise known as the Great Library of Alexandria. It seems like contemporary society simply lost interest in it, seeing that it no longer had precious and unique knowledge being stored there. Some historians even go further and state that if the Pax Romana immediately followed the library's destruction, then the Roman Empire and society in general didn't suffer all that much with its destruction. The Pax Romana was a period of great peace and order, where great successive leaders of the Roman Empire managed to implement hegemonial power and regional expansion throughout a couple of centuries. It was also around this period where the first Roman finally made contact with the mysterious empire to the east, the Han Dynasty. The Romans knew very little about this empire. They thought of it as they thought about any other civilization other than themselves, simply inferior. But the Han Dynasty had more interest in the Western rivals. It sent expeditions to try and make contact, and if you want to know about how the two finally met, please watch this video. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Obrigado.